Hey everybody, I'm Eddie Starr, and this is the College of Rock and Roll Knowledge. Class is now in session. This is where the music and culture that shaped a generation live on, and my own path through the world of rock and roll. And there he is.
Yeah.
How are you?
What's up? I'm good. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
Awesome.
You look like you're just very, how can I put it? Podcast professional. Was it in a studio or?
It's my own little makeshift studio.
Your own little thing? That's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
How do I sound? Everything sound okay?
Yeah, no, you sound great.
Cool. I'm just trying to getting started with this whole setup, so I'm trying to making sure everything works.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right on. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about I guess your musical journey, or going back to how you got started. I know you're vocalist and Arc Metal, and of course we worked together on Rockquiem, and you were an actor and a singer in that. And it's sort of, for me, it was sort of odd in a way, because you don't really find, at least in my experience, actors who were like, those two worlds were very different. And so I just was curious about your path and what inspired you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's see. Well, let's take it back, right? So like, I think this whole musical journey started in junior high school. I was in like 7th grade. I was kind of an outcast in my school. Like I was that kid that hung out with every different group. I didn't really stick with one group, but if I did have one group, it was probably like the punks. We were like the punk rock skater kids. We were like always doing the craziest shit. I grew up with like the whole Jackass era. So like we always thought we were going to do dumb stuff like that, where we just did stupid pranks, like, ran ourselves with shopping carts into parking lots and stuff like that. But anyways, the music, we would start to like I had like a small group of friends, and we would all start to go to shows together. In my hometown, it was usually at like old churches or old like community centers that we would like attend, like these hardcore metalcore, like heavy metal concerts, or like in like gymnasiums of churches and stuff like that. It was it was very strange.
Where was this?
This was in Michigan. In Michigan, in small towns. Like there was one church that I made my dad drive me to, and it took about 3 hours to figure out where it was. Then once we found it, and this church was actually only like 15 minutes from my house. We just had no idea where we were going. And I like begged my dad. I'm like, Dad, take me to the show. Take me to the show, please. Take me to the show. So my friend and I are in his truck, and we're driving around bumfuck like woods, cornfields, like all over the place, looking for this church to see this like hardcore show. And we found the church, and the concert was actually the following weekend.
Oh, man.
It's the worst, dude. Oh my God. I felt so bad. And then my dad drove me back there the next weekend because, metal.
Yeah.
He's all about, my dad's a big music guy too. He's a drummer. So I grew up with a lot of music around me, which was nice, man. It was really cool. My dad likes a lot of weird stuff though, which was inspiring to me and influential, but I was always kind of like on my own path. Like I'm a rebel, oh, I'm a rebel. Let's listen to everything that no one else is listening to. You know, like I don't. Okay. Oh, you like that? Oh, you like that stuff? Well, I hate it. You know, I don't even care who it was. And then I'd secretly go home and probably listen to it and be like, oh yeah, this is awesome.
Now, what era are we talking about here? I don't mean to.
No, you're fine.
I mean, I know Jackass, wasn't that like the late 90s or?
Yeah. So I'm 32 now. So 2007 was probably like, I was like 18 around then. 2004, 2003, I was like 15, whatever, 15, 14. Yeah. So like some of the bands that I was listening to was like, Sum 41, Blink 182,
Okay.
Slipknot. That was probably the first metal band I had ever heard. I went to one of my neighbor's houses and he turned on this album and it had no name to it. It was Slipknot's very first album, like self-titled album. And Wait and Bleed was the first like metal song I had ever heard. And my mind was just like blown. I was like, whoa, this is so aggressive and extreme and different. And I just loved it. I was like, this is awesome. And so I kind of got hooked onto that. But yeah, Slipknot, Sum 41, Blink 182, Ozzy. I loved Ozzy.
That's really funny. When I was in school, of course, I've got a little bit of time on you.
Come on.
It was very well. I mean, there's 20 years difference between me and you, so it's sort of interesting because when I was in school, my sort of time was the 80s, and
Yeah,
the punks and metal, like they were two different groups. You know what I mean? So
sure.
It wasn't like if you were into metal, like for instance, I'll give you an example. I really loved the Scorpions.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, Rudolph Schenker, because he was the only rhythm guitar player you could find in in metal. Everything was about like being Yngwie or one of those million notes a minute type guys. And so I like, yeah, I love them. I have to say I did like Quiet Riot and a few of those bands. But the thing was, I couldn't tell my friends that I liked them. So it was like this, because it was like, then you would be like, you would have been accepted in that group. So I had a very interesting, but it's weird. And, that's one of the reasons I think, I really have been interested in talking to other people, because I started to really realize that, some of these ideas that I had or experiences that I had were very unique to where I was and time and place, and I was sort of that, I was sort of in between. Like punk was over. When I was going into junior high school, it was all new wave. It was all Adamant and, that type of stuff. Culture Club and Big Country, Men at Work. And, but I had a lot of friends who were older than me who had, turned me on to the Sex Pistols and stuff like that. But it was very separated, genre wise. Like like I said, I could not say that I liked the Scorpions. And, we had a folder and you'd write all your favorite bands on your Peachy folder. I didn't know if they had Peachy folders. But we had these things that were called Peachy folders, and they were all sort of yellow, and they had sports people on them, and you would write all your bands on them. So you could not put certain bands on your folder. Otherwise, your folder would be ruined, and you would not be accepted. Your stock would plummet. So I'm just interested in, I guess, that whole thing, because I haven't run into too many people who like, metal was sort of like, at least in LA, it was, Motley Crue. It was the whole big hair thing. And it was sort of, and for me, when I was starting to, in high school, hook up with other musicians and stuff, there wasn't anybody who was into like, the Sex Pistols. They were over, they weren't the legends they've become or, anything like that. But it was very hard, because everybody wanted to play metal. especially in LA. And there were only a few clubs you could go to where you could see like, there was these other bands like Drama Rama and stuff like from New Jersey.
I
We
didn't know
probably
that.
don't even know, but
Oh, that's so interesting.
it was but it was like really weird. So I mean, I know that there was a hardcore, there was like Black Flag in California and stuff like that, but that was sort of like a separate scene. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So a lot of people, there was the people who were into like the English punk and sort of like the British glitter with the David Bowie and stuff. But metal was sort of like it was like an outlier. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, at least the people I knew. Although I did have two friends who were very hardcore Aussie and were very like, did you ever see that movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Sean, very much like that sort of
baseball
variation, with the flannel shirts and the, hey man, Aussie. So, but you didn't, I never really heard of a lot of, that whole bridge between hardcore and metal. So
yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt you with that whole spiel, but
no, that's
part of my curiosity,
Yeah, it's interesting because you have like the sex. So your kind of divide is like Sex Pistols. Ramones are 80s, right? Misfits.
Well, the Ramones are 70s, but they were around in the 80s. They were around the 80s to like 96.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the punk era, right? Like, or is that's kind of punk, and then like you're kind of classifying Scorpions and all the hair metal bands. That's metal for you guys. Yeah. Where as I was growing up, I had like I feel like they just got even more extreme. It's like the hardcore bands I grew up with were like straight edge, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, but we'll still fuck you up in the mosh pit, that kind of stuff. And then
wow,
it's crazy. And they have like their own crews, and there was like this crew called Courage Crew, and they were like a straight edge like hardcore gang that, like, if you ever saw those dudes, like I just stay away from them. Like, I don't want anything to do with those guys. There were rumors and stories about those guys. Like, I had heard a story. I mean, you could probably Google it. Like, some guy messed with somebody in a mosh pit, and like 40 dudes like jumped him, stabbed him, left him there, and they all left.
Wow.
Yeah, and like they're
crazy.
I don't know how true that is and how valid that is, but I've seen stories like that and stuff, and so it's interesting. Yeah, I grew up with like that. My divide was like this big like hardcore scene, and then the metal was like hardcore guys were like athletes. They were like jocks and Pumas, gym shorts, tank tops, and the metal guys, you could always tell who was metal because they got long hair, vests, like wallet chains, big ass boots on.
Yeah,
it's such a different divide, and how music has evolved to what it is now. It's a really interesting.
Well, now I think it's more I think they're more just genres. You know what I mean? To me, one of the things that drew me into rock and roll was the whole idea of it, or like that, okay, there's this really cool scene and we're all going to be really cool. Like, when we looked at people at school, like we used to cut pep rallies. We used to laugh at the people at pep rallies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We'd be across the street smoking and doing all the stuff we weren't supposed to be doing. Yep. But it was more about, it was about music, and it was really about the record store and hanging out and what was coming out. And it was very important to be there on Tuesday so that I still have the posters that they would give me from like the promotions, and stuff like that. Some of them, but it was sort of that world that really drew me in. And, I grew up 25 miles outside of Los Angeles, which was sort of like, it's right near Knott's Berry Farm and, right on the border of Orange County. So we used to, go up to Hollywood every weekend and party, and we'd go to clubs and stuff like that. But like I said, it was very metal. There were a few clubs. There was a place like in Long Beach, California, Fender's Ballroom, and we'd go and catch some of the bands there. But there were a lot of there wasn't as much, how can I put it? A lot of me and my friends were into stuff that had already happened. You know what I mean? Like we were into all the Generation X, Billy Idol's first band,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And like I said, I secretly loved the Scorpions.
Yeah.
Some of that other stuff because I loved Rudolph Schenker's playing, and I liked the Velvet Underground and some of those bands, and Lou Reed and what he did, and Bowie. But I was fascinated with rhythm guitar, and as a kid, I had classical guitar lessons, which my parents, I was a kid who had all the lessons. We had
That's
art
cool.
lessons and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and I really hated it. Did
Really?
part of it. Yeah, because it was like something I had to do, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And but then when I figured out, sort of made the connection, that, oh well, this is really cool. And
Yeah.
and
This is
I remember
fun.
how upset my parents were when I got this Hohner electric guitar, and I bought it off of friends, my parents' friends, who had a son who had gotten busted for like trying to sell hash to a bus driver. And, they make you
Yeah.
get rid of everything. And so he sold me the guitar for $32. And my dad was like, well, you're not going to be like, I said, oh no, I'm not going to, play it loud. I'm not, I'm going to, they really wanted me to follow into the classical thing. And the more I got into it, and I got this little PV amp, and I already knew most of the stuff, like
Yeah.
chords, but my guitar teacher, she was quite upset. And she was very classical and proper. And, and she taught me like the Marines hymn when I wanted to. I want to play chords and know how, but I figured it out. And I had this guy at Downey Music Center, and he would, I'd just tell him, well, this is what I want to do. And he basically showed me the bar, how to play bar chords. And so
Yeah.
it was really funny how that sort of materialized. But I found that by just playing rhythm, I really was like into the rhythm section and that whole part. And I really didn't want to play lead guitar. To me, lead guitar was so boring because everybody was doing it and they wanted to just play a million notes a minute. And it wasn't like that whole, it was just, I don't know. To me, I didn't really get it. I really wanted like some type of, like, I guess you could say sort of variation of the 50s. And I guess that's why the punk, like with me, resonated with me. But I know that as things developed, you had grunge, and then the hardcore, and that sort of merged, and you had a lot of those groups.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting going to those, I never went to a church show.
Yeah. Oh my God. The first time I think I went to a few shows, and before I started realizing that all these vocalists, these like really intense, extreme vocalists, were screaming about, Jesus and God and stuff. And I wasn't the most religious person in the world. I'm not crazily religious now, but I was like shocked. I was like, oh, this is interesting. But I still really enjoyed the music because I was like, yeah, dude, shred that guitar, like drum solos or insane. Like these guys were nuts. This is crazy.
Yeah, those dudes have always been around though. They had, what were they called? They were called Punks for Christ in LA.
Yeah.
I knew one guy who was in it, and he was always like, doing his thing.
Yeah.
Like with it, and it was cool, but I was more into like the sort of like the Stooges nihilistic of it, nihilistic part of rock and roll. So how did you play an instrument? I know you're the vocalist.
Yeah. So, well, I was in choir for most of my like years growing up in school. And then I took a piano class, keyboard class a couple times in high school. That was really fun. Learned some theory and stuff. And then I started playing drums because my dad's a drummer, and I was like, yeah, well, I want to play drums. My dad had a drum kit, and I was like, oh, let's do this. I want to play some drums. And I kind of my dad didn't really teach me anything. I just kind of watched him a couple times, and then I self-taught myself how to play the drums. I wouldn't say I'm incredible now, but I could like play a beat and play with people. So I started playing the drums. That was super fun. Some friends would come over, we'd rock out, shake the house. Luckily, I lived in the woods, so none of my neighbors, my one neighbor didn't complain, thank God. That was fun. And then let's see. Then I moved out, went to college, so I didn't have my drum set anymore. And then I got an electric kit. I was like, well, I don't have any money. I'm a college student. I'm gonna get a credit card and buy this electric drum kit and then pay it off in like 45 years. So I got this drum kit and I loved it, man. It was like the best thing I'd ever purchased. Like sometimes I have so much energy and I would just go home and put my headphones on. I put my iPod headphones on, then put the big headphones on over that and just like be in my room, just rocking out. And it was like a great stress reliever. And I could see that I was getting better, but I never really worked on like music, sort of say. I just listened to music and played what I felt like was right. And, so I came at I came at it as such like a different approach, but I really enjoyed it. It was super fun. And then I got to a point where I was like, dude, I'm living in New York now. I still have this drum kit and it's just folded up in my closet and I have no room. So I eventually traded that away for a bicycle, which I now have. And it's a great bike. It's really nice. But the guy was like, I'll give you this. You own a bike shop. He's like, I'll give you this free bike and for your drum kit. And I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. I'm not playing my drum kit anymore. I need a little more transportation. And due to COVID, it's nice to have a little extra transportation just in case I don't want to take the train. Nice.
So you grew up a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up a little bit. Transitioned. I now have an acoustic guitar that I play. I try and pick up every day for at least 40 45 minutes, which is nice. You say that about lead guitar, a million notes a minute. I'm definitely more of a rhythm guy, especially with acoustic. I just like, and I think that's kind of the one thing that comes to me is like when I play acoustic, the rhythms are kind of, I'm like, oh, okay, so from drumming this kind of makes sense, timing and stuff. But then when it starts to get to like picking strings, I'm just on a completely different planet. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Let me think about this. And I really have to process it and work on something for a long time in order to like figure it out. But I love my acoustic guitar, man. It's like so relaxing and to play the rhythms of just any chords put together. Makes me, it fulfills my journey of a musician, even if it's just like a little bit, every day. It's just nice.
Yeah. No, rhythm guitar is great. It's probably the most underrated instrument in rock and roll, rhythm guitar. Yeah. I mean, at least I always had problems with like sound guys who I always had to force them to turn my guitar up.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? In the board, in the mix. Because you always hear the bass and you always hear the lead guitar. And I could never hear my guitar. And I always had to make a point, except there were a couple people I had that were really, really good and were really able to get a great mix. But there's still that sort of like, okay, yeah, we're going to go lead guitar. And then, and keep that going. And you're, it's sort of like lost in the mix or something like that. But,
that's why I started singing. I never wanted to get lost in the mix,
Yeah, well, you can't. That's hard to do, I guess. I guess maybe in hardcore.
Yeah. So throw me on top, guys. Just just a little more on top.
Yeah. Well, that's what. Well, there's like that, and then there's the the pop producer who will like where it sounds like the band is in one side of the street and the singer's on the other side of the street. And like somewhere in between, it's like.
It's in stereo.
Yeah. Well, I've had to sort of, I used to have people who were very, I had that whole idea of like, the riff comes first and that, that sort of type idea. And I do think that, that is like a really hard thing to do, to really get the vocals where they're supposed to be and
Yeah.
all that placement. So I
You
try
know,
not to be too hard on it, but I've had people where I've had to say, uh, of course we were mixed. No, maybe we were mastering. And I said, and he kept going on about, oh, I think this little part we can make it better. And I said, well, I said, since it is so important, I said, I think that you should open up your wallet and pay for the rest of the time. Oh no, I think it sounds pretty good. It's
yeah.
good. We can let that. I said, wow,
Oh
it's
my
so funny
God.
how everything sounds great when you have to pay for it. I don't know. All that stuff cracks me up. But
Yeah. I haven't been in the studio much. We just started doing our first album, and I just had my first session a couple weeks ago. I have been in the studio doing voiceover stuff, but I'd never been in the studio working on music. So this is such a brand new thing for me.
really,
Yeah, never. I've been in I've been in smaller bands, but we never recorded anything. And as a vocalist, to record like rock or like metal, or I get a little extreme with my vocals sometimes. So to do when you're doing like doubling and tripling and stuff, you're just doing the same phrase over and over and over. You like really have to be careful, man. I was like, wow, I am a fucking athlete now. This is crazy. Like this this is wild. I got to get my ass up and I got to run 5 miles tomorrow, and I got to do that every day before my next session because this is a lot. But
yeah.
I didn't take much strain out of my voice, but for stamina purposes, I realize now how much these people like actually work, and I'm like, this is hard work,
Yeah,
really.
no, it really is. I think that I really enjoy the studio, but I'm really one of the type of, I'm the type of person I really like to be very, very prepared.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's like I am like, I was always pretty much a drill sergeant. My first album we did all live, and it was really great because we'd been doing shows on the weekends. So we were really tight, and we lost a bass player. Of course, it's
Oh
always a bass
no,
player, right?
we just lost ours too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're gonna start playing bass now?
I know, right? Well, luckily we're very synthy and weird, so we're trying to work around it, but we're still looking for somebody.
Yeah, I don't know why. It was always a bass player. So I had actually what we did at the time was the lead guitar player switched to bass. And so we did it as
Oh,
a three-piece. We did all the basic tracks with
oh,
everything live, and it was great. And we were so tight. I mean, we just did each song one take. It was like bam. And then
that's
he came back
awesome.
after and, like overdubbed his lead guitar parts and stuff like that. But that was pretty up there with one of those experiences where you're just like, you know, after you're done, at least from a musician's point of view, wow, I can't believe I
Yeah,
did that.
yeah. Whoa.
We were great. We were really, really tight. And yeah, and then after that, we got a bass player. We got a pretty good bass player. I mean, we had to tone him down a bit because he was listening to Rush all the time. And it's sort of like, dude, we're not Rush, all right? 3-chord rock and roll.
Handam Soya.
Yeah, I know. It was really hard because even it's cracks me up now how many people, don't know about like, some of the stuff I like. And I'm very much, I guess you could say, like the preacher, I'm very much like, if I like this, then I love it. And I'm very like,
Yeah.
I'm still the ultimate fan, of like, oh man, you got to check this out. What do you mean you haven't heard of Iggy, or the Stooges, Search and Destroy, and
Yeah.
all that
Love
stuff.
that.
So I still get in those phases of still my allegiance to, I guess what I grew up with, and what other people turned me on to. But that's
Yeah.
pretty interesting, that hardcore thing. So what are you doing? Are you guys, when you guys are recording, are you layering it, or are you doing it live, like, and then having you come in and do the vocals?
Yeah. So we're layering it. So
Okay.
Yeah, and we're working in Logic, and our guitar player luckily recorded all of his tracks at home on his DAW, and then he just sent them over to him, over to our engineer, and he just inputted all those into the tracks, which is easy.
Wow.
And then our guitar player is gonna go and record all the bass parts, because we don't have a bassist anymore. So he's gonna do that really quick. And then our drummer did the same thing. He has an electronic kit, so he recorded all of his parts at home on his kit, and he's sending those over. And then they're gonna just mix everything together. Our rhythm guitar, or our other guitarist, he did all of his stuff. He's doing his stuff in the studio, some of it in the studio, which is nice. And then we have a synth guy, but obviously he's just going to plug all that stuff at home, and then we're all just going to put it together. That way our engineer has less work and can just kind of mix it for us and master it for us.
Wow. That's cool. And how many songs have you recorded so far? You can tell me if I'm being too nosy.
No, you're fine.
Mind my own.
We just got through one in our first session, which I'm cool with. Like, we're really taking our time to make sure that everything sounds right. And
everyone's happy.
Yeah, so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody gets along good.
Yeah, all the guys are super cool, man. It's like, to me, it's such a relief to like get in the room with those guys and be able to like play. Like that's my favorite thing. Is like, okay, dudes, when is our next practice? I want to get in the room. I want to play some music. Let's get heavy. Like I just want to get heavy all the time. It's kind of like a release from your normal life, living in New York in this like concrete jungle. It's like sometimes you just gotta scream, I just feel like that. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, did radio play any part in your upbringing and turning you on to any cool music?
Ooh, like any songs on the radio? Or
yeah, like any songs on the radio.
Gosh, how long has it been since radio hasn't really been around? Like, I mean, there's still radio, but like we all just listen to Spotify and Apple Music now and stuff. I'm trying to think here. I mean,
am I dating myself or what? I'm even asking that question.
No,
I don't know. I just love.
I listen to radio.
I know, but I
Q106 was
what
like
I mean
a rock
is,
station.
Yeah, but this is what I mean about like, when I talk about the story of rock and roll. It's like, hearing that song on the radio and you're like, oh my God, this is so fucking cool, or, I have to. And that was like, I guess that story has played like such an enormous part. It's really sometimes hard, like when you were talking about, growing up and, listening to all this hardcore stuff. And, I'm thinking, the internet, should I ask them about that question about radio?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Did you, was there anything at all that you ever heard on radio that you thought, wow, this is really cool? Or probably not.
I don't know why when you asked me that question, I feel like the first thing I thought of was Chumbawamba. I don't know why that just comes to my head. I feel like the radio, when that song came out, was just like, let's play the song every 10 minutes. I get knocked down, back it up again. And then 10 minutes, I get knocked down, back it up again. Have a go. And then no one really knew the words. It's like, oh, down there, boy. It's like,
oh God,
what this guy's saying.
What about, I was going to ask you too, what about when you were like a kid, like when you were little? What do did your parents listen to radio? Yeah,
definitely. Well, I come from my parents were country and classic rock.
Oh wow.
Yeah, my mom really loves Jimmy Buffett and like Rod Stewart, those kind of guys, but then she also loves country just because we're from kind of a country town. And then my dad's like all over the place, man. It's like Rush, AC/DC, Journey, Mariah Carey,
wow,
Kenny Chesney, which I love that my dad listens to so much stuff, because I feel like that's kind of where I got my music from. I was like, well, I'm just going to listen to anything that sounds good and appreciate that, like, which I really enjoy. I'm glad that I had a dad that was like accepting of like all sorts of music, which is really cool. So whenever I go home and see him, like now our thing is like, all right, Dad, let's get out the vinyls, let's get out the record player. What do you have? Like last time I went home, we were playing Prince, Purple
Oh, wow.
Rain on a purple 45 that he has. I was like, Dad, you have a purple 45 of Prince. It's in like perfect condition. I bet this is worth something. So we last time we were home, I went through all of his vinyls and we like priced everything out. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. He's got some collectibles, which is pretty cool.
What about when you were really little? Do you have a memory of the first time, like your first thing that you heard, or did your parents ever tell you about anything about you that you didn't know? Maybe the first music that you responded to?
Yeah. Whenever someone asks me a question like that, I automatically remember I was snowboarding one time. I think it was in the 7th grade. And I I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I opened a locker and 2 CDs were in this locker, right? It was The Chronic, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. And it was D12 fight music, which is really weird. I know it's like totally far-fetched and it's just like old school rap and hip hop, but I didn't tell my parents that I had these albums because, my mom probably been like, oh my God, what are you listening to? Because if you listen to stuff now, I don't know, your kids listening to like this kind of stuff, you're like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
But man, those albums were like, that was it for me. I was like, these are sick. And then it sparked a flame in me to want to be a rapper. There was a point in my life when I wanted to be a rapper and I was writing rap lyrics all the time.
Oh my gosh. Do you incorporate rap in any way into your metal? Because there's a lot of that going on.
That's really interesting you said that. Just recently I've been working on 2 songs, and I had noticed that I was using kind of a different kind of rhythmic tempo thing within these songs. And I was like, is this, and I was asking some of my friends, and I was like, do you guys think this sounds a little bit too much like rap? And he's like, no, not at all. It sounds sick. And like it's still really aggressive, but it has like a tempo kind of rap. And I was like, well, I dig that. Like I dig that flow. So it's kind of something that just happened. And I was like, well, this is cool. I want to like try and utilize this more within this music in a weird way. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, it was strange.
Do you remember, have you ever heard of Guilt by Association?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I worked with them for a while. And,
nice.
Yeah. The kids that were on Battle for Ozfest, I don't know if you remember, they did Living in Silence. And they had a lot. He would often, JD had like he would do sort of not that, I wouldn't say it's rap, but it was almost like a specialized screaming where he did this voice, and it's just pretty trippy. They were really good. They were a really great band. I mean, it was different for me because, like I said, I'm the proponent of the, 3-chord type thing.
Yeah.
I'm not like I do listen to other things. So I have to admit that, but I guess it was like for growing up, my mom always told me, she said that the first artist I responded to was Paul Simon.
Oh, cool.
And, but she was really into like the Stones and, a lot of the Phil Spector stuff from the 60s. So there was always that, sort of like that whole rebel thing and all that stuff, and Keith Richards.
I do have a first artist that I responded to, Brooks and Dunn, definitely.
Oh, wow.
Brooks and Dunn was like my band, man. That was like country go-to, boot scoot and boogie. Like these are my guys. I remember I was in Taekwondo, and I remember putting on like I don't even remember. I was like in 4th or 5th grade. I was super little, and I had my Taekwondo gear on, and I had a cassette player, and I had Brooks and Dunn's Greatest Hits, and I also had the Mortal Kombat soundtrack on cassette. And when I would put on the Mortal Kombat theme song, and I would just run around my living room with my Taekwondo gear on and punch the air for like 5 minutes straight. And then I would do the same thing for the Brooks and Dunn part, but I would put on my rodeo gear. I had a rodeo shirt and a cowboy hat and boots and jeans, and I would just walk around and dance around the living room. Those were like my two. Yeah, that was like Brooks and Dunn was like definitely the first artist I responded to. Yeah.
What about the acting? How did you come? Is that sort of like a dual thing that did you want to be an actor first, or was that just like another way to be on stage?
That's
or acting. I mean, I just was curious about, was it, which one was it, or was it anyone? It's just sort of,
I think just the ability to perform and express and be someone that you're not for like an hour, 2 hours, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, anything like that is something to me that's like, this is very exciting. Being an actor, I feel like I could play any type of individual, which I really enjoy, and it allows me to dive into a subconscious or a different mentality that a lot of people don't get to explore. I just think it's like really interesting for me. I started acting in 6th grade. I did Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So it was like the first show I did. No, wait. Yeah. No. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was 3rd or 4th grade. 6th grade, I did a Planet musical, and I played a blues brother. And I was on this huge Blues Brother kick. I was like, man, the Blues Brothers are awesome. And my dad got me a briefcase, and I had a black suit with a tie, and I have a black fedora on, and I had this briefcase, and I had money hanging out of the briefcase, like Monopoly money. And we'd close it. And I remember I did this song about Mars, and it was called the Red Planet Blues. I got the Red Planet Blues. And my friend and I had this solo, and he was a blues brother. And I remember in the practice for it, I did this like jump. And before the actual show, he whispers to me and he goes, "Hey, Chad, will you please just don't do the jump?" And showtime comes, and I killed that jump. I did it so big, like I never did the jump before in my life. And it was a blast, man. I had so much fun. And I still have pictures from that and everything, which was kind of fun. But I did that, and then I didn't do theater for like 2 or 3 years. And then I was a jock. I played football most of my life. And then I did football, lacrosse, and then junior year, I didn't do football because I didn't want to play with the seniors because I knew they were kind of trash. And so I did theater my junior year, and I fell in love with it. And then senior year came around, and I missed football so much that I wanted to play football and do theater, so I did both. And then that kind of fell in place there. I would go to practice after school, then go right to rehearsal, and I wouldn't go home until like 11:30 at night. I remember I did High School Musical my senior year of high school, and I didn't do a first run of the show until opening night. Luckily, my part wasn't huge. I was the dad, but there were still points where I was like, what the hell is going on right now? When do I go on stage? What is my part? Kind of thing. But that was super fun. And then senior year came around, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I wouldn't say I was like extremely smart academics. Like, I was a punk rocker, a skateboard kid. I like didn't really want to go to school, and I would try and skip out on tests and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, I had an application filled out for the Marines. I was like, why might I go to the Marines? I might just do this whole military thing. And my friend was like, dude, you should apply at Western Michigan for theater. I'm going to apply there. And I was like, all right, yeah. So I applied there, gave it a shot, and they waitlisted me. And I was first on the wait list. And then they called me back a few days later and I got accepted. So I scratched the military thing because I really just wasn't trying to get shot at. No offense to any of those guys. I love that stuff and I respect everything that they do. I have a lot of friends that are in that. But I was like, yeah, let's pursue this. Let's pursue this theater thing and give it a shot. And like, I went to school for Western Michigan for theater, and it was like the best 4 or 5 years of my entire life. I had so much
That's really
fun.
cool.
Yeah.
So what do you
And
think? Do you think that you bring a lot of the skills that you utilize on stage in your acting to your music, or how do you think that affects that?
I think it's the exact same thing. I think obviously it's technically different, technique different, like within, you know, singing obviously and using your throat and hitting notes and all this kind of stuff. But engaging the audience and doing theater and music, it's just all the same thing to me. You just got to go out there. You just got to go out there and kill it. You got to. It's nice because my band is so different. It's not like a normal band where you just go up there and be yourself. I mean, obviously, you want to be yourself. That's the best thing, and play your instruments. But we're wearing costumes and.
They see that's where I wanted. That's one thing I want to contradict. I will say that. No, you don't want to be yourself, because if you want to be yourself, then who cares, right? To me, it's like when I remember like one thing about like the new wave thing and all that is one of the things that fascinated me were like, you know, people like, I mean, looking at Billy Idol or, you know, any of these people that really were like, you know, they were out there. They had their thing. And I used to always think to myself, wow, you know, they're just, can you imagine like them sitting down for breakfast and eating a bowl of Wheaties?
Yeah.
And I thought, if I can picture someone doing that, that was the thing I didn't get about grunge, quite frankly. I mean, I loved a lot of the music, but to me, it was like, who wants to see someone look terrible on stage? You know?
Yeah. Do you think?
I mean, some people did do stuff and all that, and it's not a thing. But I just think that, I mean, being on stage is it's part of showmanship. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. You know, so at least that's my thought on it. That whole thing about being yourself.
I totally agree with that.
You know what I mean?
But I agree with that. But I also think that also showing a little bit of yourself makes the audience engage and want to.
Yeah, well, you want to be authentic.
Yeah.
You want to be authentic and all that. But I just mean the whole thing of like, you see these people and they look, and I'm looking like, wow, you just look like anybody.
Yeah.
How is that? I mean, obviously it's the music, but it's not just about the music. I mean, it's really about, it's sort of like a variation of things, right? You have to perform.
Yeah.
You have to be able to sing or effectively play an instrument. And you also have to have some sort of, you know, rock and roll authority.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't have rock and roll authority, then you really shouldn't be on stage. I mean, that, at least my thing. And you look at some of the people that did it, and it was, I mean, who have gone up there, or, you know, I mean, like I mentioned, you know, you look at Mick Jagger, you look at all the different people, you look at Elvis, look at
Kiss.
Yeah, Kiss.
Kiss is a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper.
Love
yeah,
Alice
definitely.
Cooper. That was oh my God. But I only love his early stuff. All that stuff in the 80s was okay, but you know.
Yeah.
I love what I'm 18. That was, oh God, that was great. And there's a great song called Teenage Lament, 1974. It's a great, great song.
Cool. I'll check it out. So, you know, it's interesting because like, you know, like costumes, the whole stage show it does so much for you for an appearance wise, you know, like if you take some of these crazy black metal bands in Norway or like Sweden, right? and
Uh-huh.
they have all these crazy costumes and spikes and blades and makeup and black eyes and all this stuff, and it's like, if you just put them in like regular t-shirts, like, I don't think many people would care,
Yeah, no,
you know.
couldn't.
You know?
That's part of it's sort of like part of the whole thing that you're participating in. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I think it's sort of like when Kiss took off their makeup, and it was like,
Uh,
you
are
know,
you
you remember that?
no, I actually don't remember that.
Yeah, no, they took off for a while. They like, I forget when it was. It was probably sometime in the 80s. They took off their makeup. I was like, all
That's
right, cool.
like, who are you now?
Well, I mean, they were already established, but it became like a big publicity thing, if I remember correctly. But I do think that they did that, but I liked all that stuff, but then again, also too, the British glitter stuff. I loved all that,
Yeah.
the Sweet and yeah, Alice Cooper was part of that. Susie Quattro, Gary Glitter. I loved all the very big, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
just the craziness of it all. But that's really cool. So
Isn't
when do you
there
think your album's going to be out?
I would say 2 months.
All
I'd say
right,
that's a
cool.
I'd
So
say
like
that's a
around
good,
February.
yeah, February. Gonna get back from the holidays and then get right back in the studio and get our sessions moving right along and just knock it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. I used to bartend with a guy who was also a musician, and luckily he gave me some pointers. He's like, all right, so in the studio, I would ask him like, so how long would it take you to like finish a song in the studio? He's like, we'd probably do one song in a day or 2 days. So once I did that first session, I was like, yep, I get it. This makes sense. It's just a lot of repetition, a lot of repetition over and over and over. Just get it right, make it perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've done both ways. I don't know which one I like better. I mean, I like I still think, for me at least, I always loved the just like doing everything live and then make
Yeah.
it sound as best you can. I've done the layering thing. The JoyBox record, I did that with. It was
Cool.
all layered, and Bob Mars, who was my partner in that band, he's a drummer, he's a producer, and he played every instrument, a lot of instruments. So he was able to, it was more of like, I guess you could say, a songwriting process, where we'd get together, I'd give him, or I'd bring a song to him, and he'd write a bridge or something, and then we'd just sort of work on it. And that was sort of like my first experience with that. And that's cool. I think it actually, from one point of view, it's more of a songwriting type, I would say, process, or at least I thought of it that way, because you were more of like, you were going through with a fine tooth comb, like your songs, does this work? No,
Yeah.
this doesn't work. Oh, we're going to take this out or whatever. Whereas the live thing, it was great because it was very spontaneous, and it sounded like we did, like we wanted to sound, like we wanted people to hear.
Would you ever be recording and then something would just come to you and you'd have to retake the entire thing, or you step
No, I
away
made
from a week?
sure. Yeah, see, I had like my first records were a producer, Arthur Wright, and so I didn't really have a whole lot of say over about how things were really done or anything like that. But I made sure I was very prepared.
Yeah.
I made sure I was very prepared. So by the time, but what we did as a band is we went out and played the songs live a lot. We were doing like these regional tours and stuff, the West Coast. And we were very tight, and we knew the songs worked, and I think one of the best gauges to judge your work is at least I found in that experience, was being able to take the songs, and you can see on people's faces, whether they're digging it or not digging it, or which song may have a problem. Or I mean, that was the thing I think with the JoyBox record that was difficult, was because it was great doing it that way, but you also have to make sure that it translates live. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because a lot of that stuff that we did. So that was my experience. But I did, I have had, to answer your question, I have. But most of the time it's been like, wow, I wish I could have done that, again.
Yeah, there's since we're such a weird band, we do a lot of weird effects and stuff. So that reminds me of like how sometimes I'll make these pitches of these songs. I have all these reference tracks that I take into the studio with me to remember all my parts and everything, and kind of effects I want to overlay on top of different parts. But some guys will always be like, can you do this live? That's the question. Can you play this live? But luckily,
what was that band I'm trying to think of now? I'm trying to think. Not Orgy, something. There was some metal band I'm trying to think of, like the early 2000s. And I remember some friend of mine went to see him, and they were just like, oh my God. They were like Korn. So bad. Not Korn. No.
I was listening
I can't
to
remember.
Christmas last night.
Oh, really?
I was like, wow, this is crazy.
I know. Well, everything I think just sort of people, it's where they're at. That's all you can do as an artist is, this is where I'm at, and this is the best I have in this moment. And I think if you stick with that, then that's really how you get the great stuff,
Sure.
So
yeah. And luckily now, with technology and stuff, there's different like programs that we can use on stage, and all sorts of, it's like a totally down a different hole, but it makes you limitless with the type of music that you want to make.
Right.
You want to use weird effects, and like, I have a pedal that I can put different auto tunes and stuff like that kind of into it, which a lot of artists do now. Let's not beat around the bush. Like a lot of professional artists use all the smoke and mirrors, which is kind of fun, but they also just want to hear like you raw at times.
Yeah, that's true.
You make sure that you can actually do it, and you're not just like I'm like this every day.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Well, so you have the album coming out in February, so I have that to look forward to.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to ask you to do now, don't you? Well, you're going to have to do, because this podcast will be out next Friday. So in between, well, I know it's Christmas or whatever, so you're going to have to do this before then. You're going to have to put together a playlist.
I already did.
Oh, you did? Okay, well then you got to email it to me.
Oh, okay.
You have to email me the playlist. We'll put that up.
Cool.
But I've really enjoyed speaking to you, Chadwick.
Yeah, you too, Eddie. It's like
really interesting. Man. I think I think when you talk to other musicians and other people, and you hear, how the music has played a part in their journey, it's always interesting. I find myself fascinated by that, I guess because, you get stuck in a whole idea about how, the music of your time, or, whatever scene you're in, like people get really involved in a scene, and then they don't really see what else is going on and stuff. But that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you making time for me. And I will put links to, you have to send me too, all the links to Arc Metal.
Yeah.
So we can do that and put that out all over the place, so people can check that out. And you have a personal website, right, as well?
Yep. ChadwickSutton.com.
Okay. So you have to send me all the stuff.
Cool.
So people can check out your work and stuff.
That'd be great.
So, Anyway, well, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. It's so
All
good to see
right.
you. All right.
Next time.
Until next time, I'll talk to you
All
later.
right. Thanks, Ed, and have a happy holiday. I should say that.
Yeah.
Oh, and one other thing that I'm supposed to say before you go, I want to thank everybody who listens, for subscribing, for clicking that bell on YouTube, and now we're on Spotify. So check that out. And I think I've about covered it. Oh, yeah. And if you're, like I mentioned, Chadwick will be doing a playlist, and we'll put all the links so people can go check that out. All right, I've said my piece.
Long live
Tell
metal.
me your fantasy. I'll be what you want me to be. The darkness will turn to light. I'm your dirty secret tonight. Dream or not, and take a look inside. The Peepshow.
Eddie Starr's College of Rock and Roll Knowledge is a production of Ton Up Incorporated. Copyright 2020 Ton Up Incorporated.